Good Monday morning. I'm Lindsay Reiser in for Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers right now on Morning News Now. On edge, tensions high in Kenosha, Wisconsin this morning and across the country as the Kyle Rittenhouse trial nears an end. The prosecution and the defense preparing to make their closing arguments with hundreds of National Guard troops and police officers on standby. We have team coverage on what's happening and what to expect in and out of court. The waiting game. Today, President Biden set to sign that more than $1 trillion infrastructure bill into law as cities from coast to coast make plans to use that money to clear up bottlenecks and speed up shipments.
We're not counting our chickens yet. We don't have the funds yet. And we've learned a long time ago that we will not celebrate that bridge until we can actually see it.
Details on the deal sitting on the president's desk and how it could impact what's on store shelves this holiday season. Lockdown. Europe once again the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic as deaths, hospitalizations, and new cases rise to levels not seen in months. And now one country even ordering unvaccinated residents to stay home. More on the areas hardest hit and why it's happening. And ho, ho, oh, no, a heads up for parents about a different kind of shortage that could leave your kids disappointed this Christmas. Why Santa may be a no-show at your neighborhood mall this holiday season. And
we're all trying to still make the most of it.
I know,
by
exactly.
COVID, it's still a thing, so.
I know, and I think that story means we're all on the same page that it is Christmas time. It's the holiday season.
I can't even think about that right
I know, right? Because we still have Thanksgiving to get through. We'll get to that a little bit later, though. We begin this morning in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where closing arguments are set to take place later this morning in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial after 8 days of dramatic testimony.
So Rittenhouse faces 6 charges, including intentional homicide after shooting 3 men during a protest last year, killing 2 of them. Well, now Kenosha is bracing for a verdict, which could arrive sometime this week. Joining us from this morning from Kenosha is NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber, and also NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas is here on set with us. So good morning to both of you. And Ellison, we're going to start with you here. We know the big news last week. The prosecution requested that the jury also hear some lesser charges and consider those. Is that still a possibility? And what else can we expect today?
Yeah, so the judge said on Friday that he is inclined to allow the jury to consider some lesser charges as the prosecution has requested, but not necessarily all of the ones. We were expecting to get some information on what lesser charges may be allowed this weekend. The judge might have communicated that already to the prosecutors and the defense, but publicly we have not yet gotten that information. But again, he has said that he is inclined to allow lesser charges to be considered by the jury here. Remember, Kyle Rittenhouse is facing 6 different counts, 5 of them felonies, 3 related to homicides, and 1 of them a misdemeanor. Let me read you his charges just to give you a quick reminder. He's facing 1 count first-degree intentional homicide, 1 count attempted first-degree intentional homicide, 1 count first-degree reckless homicide, 2 counts first-degree recklessly endangering safety, 1 count possession of a dangerous weapon by a person under the age of 18. That last one is a misdemeanor. Again, the other 5 are felonies. Apologies for the noise. We have a trash truck going by early this morning. But so on Friday, when the judge was talking about being inclined to allow those lesser charges, he said that one potential way that could possibly go would say in the case of the second person that Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed that night, Anthony Huber, that the jury would possibly be able to consider reckless homicide instead of intentional homicide. When it comes to Joseph Rosenbaum, the first person Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed that night, the judge said he is not inclined to allow lesser charges in that instance because the defense objected. And he said he thinks that because of that, that would be overturned upon appeal. Lindsay.
And now, Danny, let's bring you in here. You're here on set with us. So what are you going to be watching for today in closing arguments? That's what we're waiting on.
Ladies and gentlemen of the morning show, I'm doing my closing argument bit. The magic word of today that we're going to hear a lot is the word provocation. This was a huge win for the prosecution to get this as a jury instruction, because if the jury buys it, it can negate self-defense in its entirety. Although Rittenhouse has the chance to reacquire self-defense, but he has to show that he withdrew from the fight and communicated that withdrawal. But otherwise, the prosecution has to disprove each and every element of self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. This is their trump card. This is their Uno, draw 4, choose the next card card. And so look for the defense to respond with this. This provocation argument was so important to the prosecution that in their opening, they mentioned it 0.0 times. They only developed this idea throughout the trial when this new evidence was sprung, this pixelated video that they're saying shows that Kyle is the first aggressor. Now, a lot of folks are saying, look, Kyle Rittenhouse, it was a provocation for him to walk around open carrying a firearm. But that's not. That may be morally true. That's not legally true. And even the prosecution is not pursuing that angle. They are arguing that at some point he lifted his firearm. That provoked the Joseph Rosenbaum attack. And everything that came after that was a domino effect.
Real quick, the fact that the prosecution wants a jury to consider lesser charges, does that give us an idea of their thinking and thinking they may not get some of the more serious ones?
Not always. Prosecutors do this, and it is a way of hedging your bets. But in a case like this, I would suspect that if the prosecution believed they had an airtight case, that they would not be asking for lesser charges. So it may be a signal of anxiety by the prosecution.
Let's go back out to Ellison in Kenosha. So, Ellison, this incident really centers around the unrest that happened following the shooting of Jacob Blake last summer. How is Kenosha preparing for this verdict?
So the governor has activated some 500 members of the National Guard to be on standby to come to Kenosha should local authorities ask for their assistance. Speaking with people here, there is kind of a quiet tension, if you will. Most people that we have spoken to, they say that they are worried that there could be some sort of violence regardless of the outcome. They're hoping that it doesn't happen. The governor has asked people who do not live in this area, in the city or the county, to stay out of this community this coming week. Lindsay, Savannah.
And now our own Gabe Gutierrez actually spoke with Rittenhouse's mother, Wendy, yesterday. First, let's listen and we'll talk on the other side. Danny.
Do you think he would have needed to defend himself if he hadn't gone down there in the first place?
You know, if he went down there to help and he was chased by a mob, he was chased by Rosenbaum, and witnesses stated that Rosenbaum lunged at Kyle and told him that he was going to kill him that night. You know, and what happened, you know, is, yeah, 2 guys lost their lives that night.
So, Danny, as you just walked us through a moment ago, I mean, this hinges on self-defense for the defense here. What do you make of comments like that, and what does that mean about that provocation argument from the prosecution that you just mentioned?
That is the right moral question. Should Kyle Rittenhouse have been wandering around in a riot with an AR-15 style weapon? Absolutely, that's something we should all debate. However, legally, it is not provocation to do what he did. Now, the prosecution or other folks might say, well, it was unlawful in that he allegedly was not supposed to be carrying a firearm. He was underage. But in Wisconsin, the provocation must be an unlawful act, and it must actually provoke the attack. So the mere fact that he may not have been allowed to carry a firearm, there's no evidence that Joseph Rosenbaum or any of the other people recognized that, and that was what provoked any attack by them.
All right, Ellison Barber, Danny Savelis, thank you both so much. We will be hearing from you plenty today. NBC News Now will air those closing arguments live later this morning.
Now to Washington, where President Biden will sign into law the new $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. The bill had bipartisan support in Congress, and both Democrats and Republicans are expected to be at the signing ceremony on the White House lawn later this afternoon. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us now with more on this. Mike, good morning. So this is a big day for the president, obviously one he's been waiting on for a while, finally managing to get this bill over the finish line. What can we expect from today's ceremony, and who do we think will be there?
Well, as then Vice President Biden once said at one of President Obama's bill signings, this is a big deal for President Biden. And that's why the White House says he really wants to use this bill signing as an opportunity to talk to the American people about 2 big campaign pledges that he feels like he's delivering on. The first is the bill itself, billions of dollars for roads, bridges, electric vehicle charging stations, replacing lead water pipes, expanded broadband access. The other pledge, though, remember how often he talked in the campaign about trying to bring Washington together, working with Republicans. That's a big part of this legislation as well. And that's why the guest list is so interesting today. The White House says they've invited every Republican who voted for this bill in the House and the Senate, but we know only a few of them so far plan to show up. Mitch McConnell, for instance, the Senate Minority Leader, he has said he's not going to be there, even though he called this a godsend for the people of Kentucky. Former President Donald Trump, he's called this a political gift for the president, and he's been criticizing Republicans like McConnell who voted for it.
And now, Mike, this comes at a difficult time for the president. Let's talk about some new numbers we have. So a poll over the weekend by the Washington Post and ABC News found that his approval rating has dropped to 41%. Now, of course, there's these concerns over inflation, the COVID-19 pandemic, and then this infrastructure bill taking quite a long time, that social safety net bill we're still waiting on. How big of a boost could this bill be for the president? I mean, do you think this is going to have an impact on voters, on the people who approve or disapprove in this poll? And then pending social and safety net package, could that help improve Democrats' chances going into the midterms next year?
Well, it was interesting to look. If you look at and dive into the numbers of this poll, there are some contradictions there. It says that voters overwhelmingly approve of the president's both infrastructure bill and that larger social safety spending bill, but they also are worried about the government spending. And the biggest worry for this White House is that roughly half of the voters in this survey said they blame President Biden for inflation concerns. And that's why you're going to see the president really hitting the road more. After he signs the bill today, he's going to New Hampshire tomorrow, talk about one of those bridge projects that's in the works, going to Michigan, another key battleground state, talking about the auto industry program. He's going to be trying to make the argument that these investments will actually help deal with the inflationary concerns Americans are feeling.
Mike, quickly, before I let you go, President Biden's agenda today, he's supposed to have a virtual meeting with his Chinese counterpart. What's on the agenda for that?
Yeah, this is a significant meeting. Now, the very careful diplomatic language they use at the White House, as we heard from Jen Psaki in previewing this, is that this meeting today is all about managing the responsible competition between these two countries. President Biden met President Xi when they were both vice presidents a decade ago. This is a personal relationship that the president really wants to use now to try to both deal with some of those areas of tension, including trade and human rights, but also find areas where they can continue to work together, especially on climate. We saw that bear out with the big climate deal that was reached in Scotland over the weekend.
All right, Mike Memoli at the White House for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The infrastructure bill will send much needed money to states across the country for repairs and investment. And one state that could feel a huge benefit is Kentucky. Officials there are hoping to make major improvements to the Brent Spence Bridge, which is a vital trade route that connects the state with Ohio. And NBC News correspondent Cal Perry joins us now live from Covington, Kentucky. Cal, good morning. So first off, start by talking to us about how important this bridge over the Ohio River is, why it needs an upgrade, and what that upgrade could mean for future trade.
Well, look, it's vital for American infrastructure. There's no question about that. The bridge behind me carries some 3% of American GDP every year over the bridge. And look, it's been a decades-long battle to get this bridge fixed. In 1985, we saw an expansion of the lanes on the bridge, and now it carries much more traffic than it was designed to carry. 150,000 cars a day, but it was only designed to carry 85,000 cars a day. It is very symbolic of the American infrastructure, the problems that need to be overcome, and why this bill is important. I had a chance to speak to the Kentucky governor yesterday about it. Here's a little bit more on what he said about the bridge.
This just isn't a project that Kentucky and Ohio benefit from. These are your manufacturers and your distributors in virtually every state east of the Mississippi. And while the bridge is old, it is structurally sound, but it was never designed for this much traffic. And so building a companion bridge, which is this project, which I want to be the governor to finally get done after 3 or 4 others have tried, after 3 former presidents had pledged to get it done. I believe that now is the time.
Now, that companion bridge could cost upwards of $2.5 billion, but the president saying the state of Kentucky could see some $10 billion out of this bill. And, of course, Ohio will also be kicking in for the bridge. So hopes are high that we could finally see some funding and some work done on what is a key part of American infrastructure, guys.
And Cal, we know that big signing is going to be today, and there's been a lot of politics around this. A lot of Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, saying he's not going to be at the signing ceremony. Other Republicans have been attacking people on their own aisle for voting for it. Did you talk to the governor about the symbolism here of this win?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's a little surprising that Mitch McConnell is not going to be there. He hailed the bill. Now he's obviously caught in a difficult political position. But as you're going to hear from Governor Beshear, it is exactly as you say, very symbolic of the bipartisan effort that Washington put forward. Take a listen.
I believe it will be the signature project, the visual of this bipartisan infrastructure bill. A bridge connecting a state run by a Democratic governor with a Republican governor, of having a Republican U.S. senator, the minority leader, having voted for it, and the fact that it is so sorely needed. but also so necessary for our economy.
It'll be interesting to see this signing ceremony as it plays out there. Governor Beshear, obviously, with the high hopes of bipartisanship in Washington, though, you know, we could probably not expect that to last past like 5 p.m., guys.
All right. That's a pretty good prediction, Cal, in front of a beautiful sunrise there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon is expected to turn himself in later today after being indicted by a federal grand jury for contempt of Congress. Bannon was charged with 2 counts after refusing to answer questions related to the January 6th riots. It's the first time anyone has been prosecuted for contempt of Congress after asserting executive privilege. The decision could have major implications for the House committee's investigation moving forward. NBC News national security correspondent Ken Delanian is outside the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. with more for us. Hey, Ken, good morning. So first off, walk us through exactly what Steve Bannon was charged with and why.
Good morning, Savannah. Bannon was indicted by a grand jury in Washington on 2 counts, as you said, of contempt of Congress, one relating to his refusal to comply with a subpoena to testify, and another relating to his refusal to turn over documents to that House committee investigating the January 6th attacks. These are misdemeanor charges that carry a penalty of up to a year in jail and up to a $100,000 fine. And it's an unusual move by the Justice Department to bring this kind of case, but nonetheless, they've brought it, and Steve Bannon is facing these criminal charges.
And we mentioned that he'll be turning himself in. A law enforcement official says that he'll surrender later today and then appear in court this afternoon. What do we expect to come out of that court appearance?
That's right. Well, first, we expect him to turn himself into the FBI's Washington field office down the street. And then later today, he will be arraigned in the federal courthouse behind me. And in an arraignment, the charges against him will be read, and he'll have a chance to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. And there may be some scheduling matters. These are misdemeanors, so the issue of detention is not in play. And then who knows what else might happen, whether he makes a statement, whether there are other revelations, remains to be seen. We'll be watching closely, Savannah.
Now, can we mention that this is the first time anyone's been prosecuted for contempt of Congress after asserting executive privilege? So Trump has been claiming executive privilege to prevent the House committee from accessing key documents or even questioning witnesses. Does Bannon's indictment make that a weaker strategy? And tell us what this does mean for the investigation moving forward.
Right. As you mentioned, the Justice Department has been very reluctant to get in the middle of these disputes between Congress and the executive branch, and in fact has passed on many chances to levy these charges in both the Obama administration and the Trump administration. But clearly in this case, Attorney General Merrick Garland thought that the rule of law was in play here. In fact, he said as much in a statement that this was such a blatant disregard for the will of Congress that he felt that these charges were warranted. Now, this issue of executive privilege, though, this may be a factor in this case and other cases. The question of whether a former president can claim executive privilege is being litigated right now in that lawsuit that Donald Trump has against the National Archives. So it may be a good strategy or a bad strategy. It's Donald Trump's only strategy. And even if he can delay the committee getting some of these documents, in a sense, he wins. So we'll have to see what the courts decide about that and whether they move this thing forward, Savannah.
All right, Ken Delanian, thank you so much.
We've heard this before. Health officials in the U.S. are paying close attention to what's happening in Europe right now. Coronavirus cases are rising to new levels there, despite the widespread rollout of vaccines. Nearly 2 million new cases were reported in Europe last week. That is the most in a single week in that region since the pandemic started. The situation is so bad in Austria right now. They're going back into lockdown, but only for the unvaccinated. About 2 million Austrians who haven't gotten the shot are now being told to stay home and only go out for essential trips. NBC News correspondent Claudio Luvango joins me now from Rome. So, Claudio, let's start in Austria. What's the situation there? How does this new lockdown work?
Well, this is a full lockdown, essentially, Savannah. Now, you remember that what a full lockdown looks like. Well, basically, you're allowed to go out only for the basic needs. So you need to go to the supermarket, you need to go to the pharmacy, you need to go to work, or you need to go to get that jab, that vaccination jab. And that is being essentially all the people who haven't been vaccinated in Austria are being told to do that. Stay at home unless you really have to go out. And they're doing that to try to boost the vaccination campaign, which in Austria is stuck at a little over 60%, which is very low compared to neighboring countries such as Italy, which neighbors with Austria. Here we have a vaccination rate of about 80%, which means that most of the overall majority of the adult population is now fully vaccinated, so fully immunized. And we see that in the numbers. I mean, we do have a surge in cases here as well, but the hospitalization and the death toll is very, very low compared to other countries like Austria and other countries where the vaccination rate is not so high. But Austria is not the only country that is thinking about or has already introduced new lockdowns. The Netherlands, for instance, is having similar problems. They have introduced a partial lockdown, meaning that the public places like restaurants and bars and places like that, they will close early at 8 o'clock in the evening, and spectators will not be allowed, at least for the time being, to go and see sporting events, once again to try to stop that fourth wave, which is affecting the whole of Europe.
Well, Claudio, let's go east of the Netherlands and Austria, because an official at the World Health Organization is calling this specific situation in Eastern Europe truly disastrous. So 3 countries right now are reporting record daily deaths. Why is this happening, especially months after the vaccine's been available?
Well, if you think about the vaccination rate that I was mentioning earlier, 80% here in Italy and a little over 60% in places like Austria, just look east in Eastern Europe, in places like Romania and Bulgaria, the vaccination rate there is between 25 to 35%. And that is really, really low. And what's happening there? What you expect. There is a surge in the number of cases and the number of infections with record-breaking numbers since the start of the pandemic 2 years ago. And there is a surge also in the number of people who are dying there. The health system is completely overwhelmed. Essentially, what they're experiencing in Eastern Europe, it sounds like, and it looks like a first wave, not a fourth wave, because of the very low vaccination rate. Because if you combine that with the complacency among the population with the wearing of the masks or keeping social distance because people during the summer think it's all over, well, that's the result that you have.
All right, Claudio Lavanga, thank you so much.
Let's stay on this and bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Uche Blackstock. Dr. Blackstock, always great to have you with us. So let's pick it up right there. We just heard Austria going back into lockdown for those who are not vaccinated. Could this serve as a warning to Americans here in the U.S. who have been reluctant to get the vaccine up until now? I mean, we know Europe has kind of been this early indicator for us throughout the pandemic. What do you think this could mean here?
Good morning, Savannah. And I think as your correspondent mentioned, we're seeing this in Europe, especially in countries with low vaccination rates, and combined with Delta, is we're seeing these surges. And I think we need to think about places in the U.S. with low vaccination rates. We've only fully vaccinated about 58% of our population. We're heading into the winter, cold weather, people will be mingling indoors. There's waning immunity from people who were vaccinated earlier in the year. Only 7 states with mask mandates. And so I do think that we should be incredibly concerned about what's to come and use what's happening in Europe as a harbinger of what to expect here.
You know, Dr. Claudio addressed this, but there's vaccine hesitancy everywhere in the U.S., in Europe. I mean, the latest data, for example, show that only 23% of adults in Bulgaria have been fully vaccinated. In Romania, that number is just 34%. So is this a situation in which boosters wouldn't really help because so few are vaccinated to begin with?
Yeah, I know. Definitely, that is such an excellent point. We know that for the vaccinated, there's this issue of waning immunity, mostly just against infection. The vaccines are still effective against the most severe outcomes. But really, it's the fact that there are such large percentages of the populations in these countries, and even, in local areas here in the U.S., regional areas, that remain unvaccinated. And until we get those vaccination numbers up, we'll continue to see surges, which I think is why it's important that we have to think about these other layers of mitigation, mask wearing, rapid testing, ventilation, filtration. We can't forget about those other layers of strategies that can help keep the case numbers down.
Absolutely. And doctor, what does this mean for Americans who are vaccinated? What should people be doing right now if we are looking at the potential of a winter surge?
Right. I mean, I think even fully vaccinated people need to be careful, think about what's going on in your community. I would definitely still be wearing masks indoors in crowded places, and also be thinking about the other vulnerable people around you, the elderly, immunocompromised people whose immune systems are not as strong, even if they are vaccinated. We have to make sure we're keeping everybody safe.
All right. Dr. Blackstock, always great to have you. Thanks so much for your expertise this morning.
Tracking some wild weather from the weekend. Rain, hail, and a tornado hit parts of the Northeast.
Yeah, I was not here for that, but I saw a lot of videos of the hail. NBC's meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with a look at the aftermath of that storm. Hey, Bill, are we in the clear?
Yeah, it was a wild Saturday, though. Usually we don't talk about things 2 days, after they happen, but it was just such a rare event. I mean, we're talking about areas in states like Rhode Island and Connecticut that have never had a report of a November tornado before until Saturday. So let me show you some of the pictures and some of the damage from those. These weren't big, huge tornadoes. These weren't the ones that, you can get in like Oklahoma, but they were what we call, EF0s or EF1s, winds in the range of maybe 80 to about 110 miles per hour. That's still plenty strong enough to take down a lot of trees. We had some minor structural damage on a few homes. The biggest issue was the trees falling on power lines, knocking power out, and obviously pictures like that with trees falling on cars. So in all, 8 total tornadoes reported in New England in the middle of November. Pretty wild. All right, so let's get to what we're dealing with. In the wake of that, the cold air has moved in. We've had some lake effect snow. This is the kind of stuff we expect to be talking about in November. So the cold is on its way down over the warm lake. So we have a little bit of additional lake effect left. Not a lot, just the hill towns south of Buffalo and some areas of the Adirondacks. But it's a cold morning. For areas of the south, this is by far the coldest morning you've had this winter. 30s in Jackson and also Montgomery. Atlanta's at 42. Even Savannah, Georgia's at 41. And when you add the wind in, it feels even colder than that. So the forecast for today, not everybody's cold and chilly. Look at Denver, 75 and sunny. Oklahoma City and Dallas, gorgeous. New Orleans, very nice. So there are some areas of the country that still feel like fall, but still feeling like winter the next 2 days, especially in New England. And my word of advice to you guys, hope you're listening. Thursday in the Northeast and New England is going to be about 65 to 70 degrees. We do not have many of those days left. So if you're thinking about maybe if I need to burn a day off, Thursday is your day.
You got 4 days to create an excuse. All right, Bill Cairns, thanks so much.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, still to come on this show, new concerns about the health of Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, this after she pulled out of an event that was supposed to mark her return to public appearances. That's next on Morning News Now. We'll take you to London for the latest on her condition. Breaking news this morning, police in the UK have declared yesterday's explosion outside a women's hospital in Liverpool a terror incident. A taxi exploded near the entrance of the hospital, killing the passenger and injuring the driver. Authorities say the passenger appeared to have made an improvised explosive device that led to the blast, but the city's mayor told the BBC the driver managed to lock the suspect in the car. 3 men have been arrested in connection with the incident.
There are new concerns this morning about Queen Elizabeth's health. She didn't attend yesterday's Remembrance Day ceremony in London honoring fallen British military members. Buckingham Palace says the Queen sprained her back, and it's another recent health setback for Britain's longest reigning monarch.
That's right. NBC News correspondent Kevin Tibbles is following the latest for us from London. Hey, Kevin, good morning. So first, how's the Queen doing this morning? What do we know about her condition?
Well, obviously, the palace is releasing statements that say that she has indeed strained her back. I would like to say, first off, that Remembrance Day is a very important day of remembrance here in the United Kingdom that has existed since the end of the First World War. And this was only the 7th time in her 69 years on the throne that Queen Elizabeth II has missed the Remembrance Sunday ceremony. As we were talking earlier, she has had some health concerns over the past few months. She has not been seen in public for some 3 weeks' time. She was supposed to go to an event in Northern Ireland and, of course, on to Scotland for the environmental conferences that were taking place last week. She missed those. Spent a night in hospital, and then, of course, it was said that she, and because of the Remembrance Day ceremony was so important to her and her family, that she would have been at that ceremony yesterday, and she was not there. Her son, Prince Charles, took her place. Interestingly enough, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, yesterday, while speaking at the environmental conference, had this to say because, of course, the fact she was not at the Remembrance Day ceremony raised so many eyebrows. Here's what he had to say.
I did see the Queen for an audience last week on Wednesday in Windsor, and she's very well.
Now, basically, the Queen, who has been on the throne for 69 years, is also 95 years old. In the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a time when people are getting double vaxxed or double jabbed, as they say in the United Kingdom, and getting booster shots, perhaps the palace is just being very careful in the events that the Queen is being allowed to attend. Of course, her entire family there, save Harry and Meghan, were there for the ceremony yesterday, with Prince Charles laying the Queen's wreath in her absence at the Cenotaph here in London. Back to you.
And Kevin, we know the public has an interest in how the Queen is doing, but it's not like we get day-to-day updates on her condition or even her ailments. Do we have any more details on some of those health issues that have sidelined her recently?
Well, again, as I just mentioned earlier, I think really the fact that she is frail and 95 years old, spent the night in hospital with what they referred to as an infection, and was released after only one night. I'm just going to rely on the Prime Minister of Great Britain for my opinions this morning, and he said that he spent some time with the Queen last Wednesday and that she was in fine shape. And again, we have not heard anything further from the palace, save to say that she expressed great regret at not being able to attend yesterday's events. Probably if it was up to her, she probably would have been there, but I think that she probably has decided to take her medical advisor's advice.
Absolutely. All right. Well, she deserves it. I mean, 95, and look at all she's always doing.
And she lost her nightly martini.
I know. I mean,
absolutely.
Give it back to her. Come on. All right. Kevin Tibbles, thanks so much. And coming up, the dangers of pregnancy during a pandemic, especially for women of color.
When we return here on Morning News Now, we're going to have exclusive results from a new report that explains how race plays a role in premature births. Sesame Street's newest resident is making history. Ji Young is the first Asian-American Muppet in the show's 52-year history. She's a 7-year-old Korean-American who loves playing her electric guitar and skateboarding. As her creation really follows discussions on how the show could meet the moment. Of course, we all remember the events like the rise in anti-Asian hate incidents in the last year. Ji Young will be introduced in the See Us Coming Together, a Sesame Street special airing on Thanksgiving Day on HBO Max and Sesame Street's social media platforms.
Oh, I love that. Sesame Street is always doing the right thing in terms of, especially when you think about who the audience is.
But I still can't believe in this stage we're still talking about first.
I know. But we really are. Yeah, they've had a few in this year.
Looking forward to the unveiling.
Absolutely.
There. Well, a new report really shows the struggles right now that women across America are having during pregnancy and childbirth, all, by the way, in the middle of a global pandemic. Morning News Now is getting a first look at a new March of Dimes report card, which says, quote, the U.S. remains among the most dangerous of developed nations for childbirth, particularly for communities of color. For the first time in 6 years, the number of overall premature births in the U.S. declined, except for some key groups. The rates of preterm birth are increasing among communities of color, specifically for Black, American, Indian, Alaska Native women. March of Dimes gave the U.S. a C- grade, with a little more than 10% of all births being premature.
Joining us now is the president and CEO of March of Dimes, Stacey D. Stewart. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us and unveiling this report here on Morning News Now. So let's talk about some of these numbers here and numbers of premature births in the past year, and especially these racial disparities that we see among your report. So your report found Black, American, Indian, and Alaskan Native women are 60% more likely to give birth preterm compared to white women. Now, we know the pandemic also, by the way, impacted communities of color specifically. So how much do you think the pandemic played into these preterm birth numbers?
Well, thanks for having me. And first of all, the March of Dimes issues this report every single year as an indicator of the overall state of maternal and infant health in the country. And we were having a crisis around maternal and infant health even before the pandemic. We certainly think that the pandemic has made things a lot more complicated for women who are pregnant, women who may be breastfeeding. And that's certainly true for women of color, as you just mentioned, where Black women and Indigenous women are 60% more likely to give birth prematurely. But I think one of the most important things about this report is that even though we've seen a very slight decline in the preterm birth rate overall, we have seen a widening in those disparities. So what we know is is that the pandemic has probably made it worse for women of color, Black women of color, Indigenous women of color who are pregnant and giving birth during the pandemic. And that's one of the things that we want to call attention to, is that we are still in the midst of this pandemic fighting a maternal and infant health crisis, and we have so much more work to do to actually help more moms and babies be healthy.
I mean, really, any one is unacceptable, but we know that more than 22 million women of childbearing age live in what are called maternity care deserts. So this is a new term to us. What does that mean, and what's your advice to women in these areas?
So one of the things about maternal and infant health in this country is, and you mentioned this earlier, it's really shocking for people to really understand that the U.S., as one of the wealthiest nations in the world, is also one of the most dangerous developed nations in the world in which to give birth. And there's so many reasons for it. Lack of access to insurance. But one of the things that you mentioned around maternity care deserts, these are places where women live, counties that have no access to obstetric care. And over half of all the counties in the country actually have no access to obstetric care, meaning no hospital offers labor and delivery, no certified nurse midwife, no OBGYN, or they have very limited care. And this affects really millions of women of childbearing age. About 7 million women of childbearing age live in these deserts or close to deserts. And that's one of the things that the March Times we're fighting for, making sure that women have access to coverage by extending Medicaid postpartum 12 months, making sure that women have access to different levels of care, for example, access to doulas and midwives. These are the things that we need to do in order to address the maternal and infant health crisis, especially for women of color.
Now, you mentioned how people might be shocked, I mean, to hear these statistics about the U.S. as one of the wealthiest countries. I think just seeing that C- on the screen might be shocking to some people. I mean, that's not a good grade. What can be done to improve upon that?
Well, that's not a good grade. I mean, there is a little shining light in this, where about 33 states plus D.C. and Puerto Rico actually did see a slight increase in their rates, but 13 states actually saw a decline in their an increase in their preterm birth rates, I should say. And one of the things that we have to do in this country is really look at this issue holistically. We have to make sure that women have coverage to go to the doctor, to get prenatal care. We know that far too many women don't receive adequate prenatal care. But really the health of moms and babies is really determined by how we live. So we've got to look holistically at what we call social determinants of health. And especially that's true for women of color, where we know the effects of racism and discrimination can have an impact on their physical health, their mental health, and that shows up in some of these rates around preterm birth, maternal mortality and morbidity, women that die as a result of pregnancy and childbirth. So our advocacy at the March Times is really very holistic and comprehensive, working with Congress to pass what's called a momnibus package of bills to address this issue holistically.
It is important to focus on both prenatal and postpartum care. Stacey D. Stewart from the March of Dimes, thanks so much.
Thank you. Good to see you. And coming up, a hero's welcome for Aaron Rodgers, the Packers quarterback, back on the field after recovering from COVID and those misleading comments about his vaccination status. More on his return and reaction from fans.
And our new week-long series, The Cost of Care, a candid look at the struggle of young adults who become their parents' primary caregivers. This is Morning News Now. We are kicking off a week-long series here on NBC News about the challenges and the cost of caring for loved ones. We begin with young adults who've suddenly had to become their parents' primary caregivers. NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Rule has a candid look at their lives.
Oh, look at the pumpkins. Oh, yeah.
Casey Smith was a 27-year-old graduate student when her mother, Anna, had a stroke.
I was definitely not prepared for it at all.
She put off her dreams of moving to Europe and teaching English, instead staying home in Rochester, New York.
Taking care of my mom became the most important thing for me.
1, 2. Her mom needs 24-hour care. So after Casey installed a wheelchair ramp and a walk-in shower, her mom moved in with her. It hasn't always been easy, especially for Casey's career and personal life.
There's many times I felt very lonely, and sometimes it was hard to relate to my friends.
But she's not alone. Across the country, 1 in 5 Americans are caregivers, and there's increasing awareness. Many are like Casey in their 20s and 30s.
I'm Katie Hallecky. I'm 29 years old.
I'm Erica Steiner.
My name is Angie Clubb, and I'm a caregiver to my mom who has dementia.
Becoming a caregiver at a younger age can have long-term effects.
It takes finances, it takes time, it takes energy.
And can impact their personal and professional lives.
I can't help but think that it set me back in some ways, especially in my career.
Compared to caregivers who are older, they're less likely to have paid sick days and family leave and the ability to work from home. Yet despite the challenges,
being a caregiver has brought me purpose.
Many young caregivers say the experience has given them direction. Bianca Padilla started caring for her grandmother when she was 22 years old.
What did that do to you? I became an entrepreneur because it was just this huge desire to help the community of caregivers, because I was, of course, one of them.
She started Carewell, a website that sells healthcare products, but also provides resources and information.
What is your advice for new caregivers? The first thing I would say is you don't have to do it alone.
That means asking for help from other family members, doctors, and nurses. Other advice? Safe-proof your home. Install bed rails and shower bars. Preparing as much as possible for the unexpected.
Like, why is it hard?
Because you take care of me, who's an adult.
Stephanie Rule, NBC News.
And our thanks to Steph for that great report. Now it's time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Yeah, Silvana now joins us this morning. Good morning, Silvana.
Good morning, guys. So Southwest Airlines is offering flight attendants and other workers incentives to try to avoid disruptions during the holidays. According to an internal memo, flight attendants, pilots, and operations employees could receive up to 120,000 frequent flyer points. Southwest is also offering triple pay to ground employees for working Thanksgiving and Christmas and double pay for overtime shifts during the holidays. Southwest had canceled more than 2,000 flights around the Columbus Day weekend. Walmart has released its third and official Black Friday ad today, along with details of the holiday sale. The big online event begins 7 p.m. on Monday, November 22nd, but members of Walmart Plus get 4 hours of early access to the deals, and these include the hard-to-find PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. The in-store sale starts at 5 a.m. on Black Friday. Walmart stores will be closed on Thanksgiving Day for just the second time since the 1980s due to the pandemic. And Microsoft and Gucci have teamed up on a limited edition Gucci-themed Xbox Series X. Only 100 are available for $10,000 each, and the console is etched with the Gucci logo and comes with an Xbox-branded Gucci suitcase to carry the console and Gucci-themed controllers. Owners will also get a subscription to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, and if you must have one, it will be available starting Wednesday on Gucci's website and in select Gucci stores. Back to you.
Huh, that seems unnecessary. Right? I mean, I guess the
time for the
suitcase is
holidays.
cool. Let's throw that in there.
Good timing.
Yeah. All right, Silvana, thanks so much.
You got it.
Now, 10 days after testing positive for COVID-19, Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers returned to the field yesterday. He was met with a warm welcome from his home crowd, even after his misleading claims surrounding his vaccination status. NBC News reporter Gary Grumbach was at the game, and he joins us now again from Lambeau Field. Gary, good morning. So, I mean, you were there firsthand. What was the scene like when Aaron Rodgers was introduced yesterday, and what did the quarterback have to say after the game about his return?
Good morning, Savannah. Yeah, he came out onto the field, and it felt like the past 11 days simply hadn't happened. The crowd erupted in cheers. People of all ages across the stadium were wearing proudly their Aaron Rodgers number 12 jerseys. But I got to tell you, after the game, after the 17-0 win, he did a press conference with reporters, and he said he was emotional and exhausted. Emotional because he says he was misty-eyed as he left the field after the game, but this was not any sort of record-breaking game for Rodgers. In fact, he didn't even throw a touchdown pass throughout the entire game, but he did, in fact, say he was misty-eyed as he left the field, joining the team after a missed week last week. He also said that he was tired. Of course, it's been 11 days. He's had COVID, and he's been in the national spotlight as well, Savannah.
Now, Gary, we know Rodgers' comments about the COVID vaccine, did divide his fans despite what that welcome might have felt like yesterday. Did you get any sense of how they were feeling about the return of their star quarterback?
Yeah, I talked to a ton of fans out here while they were tailgating, and they were having a great time. And I will tell you one, they were just excited Aaron Rodgers was back. They did lose last week against the Chiefs, and they were excited to have him back against Russell Wilson, who was also returning for the Seahawks. The other part, though, many folks said they wish he didn't mislead the public on his vaccination status. Here's what a few people I talked to had to say.
think it was a frustrating choice that he made with his semantics before the season on it. But it's, he had to learn with it, and I think he's going to get a lot of feedback from people moving forward as well.
I think everybody has choice, and that's okay. If those are your choices and you don't really want to admit it, it's fine, whatever, go with it. He's playing today, and it's all water under the bridge.
Now, while some say it's water under the bridge, he is the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. He's somebody kids look up to and want to be like across the country. So when he's saying things like he's taking ivermectin, which, of course, is a horse dewormer to cure coronavirus, it certainly gives some people some pause. Savannah, Lindsay?
All right, Gary Grumbach, who, as I mentioned, was there yesterday. So, I mean, what an assignment in that snow. You are dedicated to us, Gary. Thank you. Good to see you. And coming up, a Christmas time tradition threatens Santa could be skipping out on your local mall this year.
That makes me very sad, right? Because we have seen Santa every year.
Up next, we'll tell you about the unusual shortage that could ruin many families' holiday plans at the mall.
And Pianos for the People, how one nonprofit is helping kids in one community learn about the power of music. Next on Morning News Now. All right, parents, we're giving you the warning now. If you got little ones running around in your room, you might want to turn down the volume a little.
Give you a second.
We're going to give you a little bit of a holiday spoiler alert here about Santa's little helpers. And it turns out it might be kind of hard for them to show up in every mall this year.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, we've been talking about a massive nationwide labor shortage, and that's leaving malls and stores scrambling for St. Nick's helpers just when everyone really needs that Christmas cheer. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa explains.
Happy holiday!
It's a holiday rite of passage, the annual visit to St. Nick. But this year, Santa Claus may not be coming to town.
That makes me very sad, right? Because we have seen Santa every year.
The U.S. labor shortage now felt as far as Santa's workshop, with thousands of unfilled gigs ahead of the holiday season. Mitch Allen runs the national group Hire Santa, which pairs Christmas characters with venues around the world.
We've never seen a Santa shortage like this.
He says requests are up more than 120% compared to pre-pandemic levels.
People are wanting to get back to traditions. Last year, they weren't able to get together with their families. So this year, they want to, and they want to include Santa.
What is it that you want for Christmas?
Lego. Several organizations reporting a 15% drop in staffing. Why so few Santas? Many have retired during the pandemic. Others are at higher risk of COVID and sitting this season out. Mitch Allen estimates, sadly, several hundred have likely died from the virus.
But I do make a lot of my visits here.
Los Angeles area Santa Courtney Lofton says he's being extra cautious.
It's a human safety issue. And I think that, everybody needs to follow suit. And Santa's no different.
For those who do get time with Father Christmas, the majority won't be able to share their wish list on his knee due to social distancing requirements. A shift from tradition, yes, but Santa says also an opportunity to practice patience.
And if you really want to see Santa, he's always in your heart.
That's true. Right?
Yeah, and he'll be making the rounds on Christmas Eve.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Santa can still fly.
Silver linings.
The sleigh, yeah.
All right, thanks, Emily.
Thanks.
Well, we can all relate to the really transformative power of music. And now a new generation of musicians in St. Louis is getting that first taste.
Yeah, NBC News senior national correspondent Kate Snow introduces us to a program that's bringing pianos to kids.
In this St. Louis storefront, these kids are getting a gift they never thought possible.
Groups of 3, black keys, you find it? That's what piano lessons are. It's a gateway to self-discovery.
Discovery through music. Thanks to a nonprofit called Pianos for People. Its mission to build community, self-esteem, and to empower those of any age with limited resources by providing free pianos and lessons. So far, the group has donated more than 320 gently used pianos.
You ready?
Mom of 4, Essence Starks, applied online and got hers in September.
It was amazing. It calms me, and I like trying out new things.
And something the kids say was worth the wait.
We wanted it for a long time. We were really excited.
That joy, part of the plan for founders Tom and Jean Townsend. They started the organization in 2012 to honor their late son, Alex, a musician who died in a car accident.
And you wanted to find a way to keep going and to give him a legacy. Pianos for People was a major focus because of Tom and Alex's belief and my belief in the healing, transformative power of music.
With Tom now also gone, Jean continues their inspiring work.
What do you love about what happens there? When they come in those doors, they know that they are nurtured and loved.
Even cared for during COVID by teachers like Kaya Baker.
We just took a deep breath and just deep dived in there.
The group held virtual recitals and Zoom lessons. Classes now back in person, providing the keys to breaking down economic barriers.
It's important for everybody to understand that people care about them. It's so much more than just music.
Making such a difference in those kids' lives.
Absolutely.
Our thanks to Kate for that reporting. And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Stick with us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.